Since the dawn of time, humans have looked to the skies and whispered questions about forces greater than themselves. What if I told you that woven into the fabric of every ancient civilization are stories so powerful they've outlasted empires, tales of gods who shaped mountains with their bare hands, goddesses who commanded the tides with a glance, and divine battles that decided the fate of mortals? These aren't just myths, they're the beating heart of cultures that thrived thousands of years ago, and their echoes still ripple through our lives today. Picture this, a world where lightning isn't just weather. It's the wrath of Zeus hurling his thunderbolt, where the rising sun isn't merely a celestial event, but a golden chariot pulled across the sky by Apollo. These stories did more than entertain, they explained the unexplainable, guided moral codes, and united entire civilizations under shared beliefs. From the icy realms of Norse legends to the sun-baked temples of Egypt, every culture crafted its own pantheon of deities, each with epic sagas that blended love, betrayal, creation, and destruction on a cosmic scale. And here's the astonishing part, even now these ancient tales whisper to us. They're hidden in the constellations we name, the holidays we celebrate, and the heroes we idolize. So what if we could unravel these divine mysteries together? Over the next 25 epic stories, we'll journey across time and continents, meeting gods who walked among mortals, goddesses who defied fate, and legends so vivid, they'll make you wonder if there's more to these myths than we ever imagined. This isn't just history, it's a tapestry of human wonder stitched with threads of the divine. Ready to begin, let's step into the first story where the line between myth and reality blurs. The skies above Mount Olympus trembled as Typhon, the monstrous serpent born from the depths of Tartarus, rose with a roar that split mountains. His very breath was a hurricane, his body a writhing mass of vipers, and his eyes burned with the fury of the underworld. This wasn't just a battle, it was a war for the cosmos itself. The ancient Greeks believed in an eternal struggle between order and chaos, and this clash between Zeus and Typhon embodied that fear like no other myth. Imagine the terror of watching the earth itself rebel. Typhon wasn't just a beast, he was chaos personified, sent by Gaia, the earth goddess, to overthrow the Olympians and drag the world back into primal darkness. The gods fled at his approach, even mighty Apollo, even Ares, god of war. Only Zeus stood firm. Thunder cracked as he gathered his lightning, each bolt a weapon forged in the heart of the heavens. The battle raged across the land, shaking the seas and scorching the earth. Typhon tore whole mountains from the ground and hurled them like pebbles, while Zeus answered with storms so fierce they turned day into night. What makes this story so gripping isn't just the spectacle, it's the deeper meaning woven into every strike of lightning. For the Greeks, Zeus' victory wasn't just about brute strength. It symbolized the triumph of civilization over savagery, of laws over anarchy. Without Zeus, there would be no harvest, no justice, no cities, just endless, writhing chaos. That's why temples to Zeus rose on the highest hills, where people could look up and feel safe beneath his dominion. But the myth also held a warning. Typhon wasn't truly destroyed, just imprisoned under Mount Etna, where his fiery breath still leaks out in eruptions. The Greeks understood that chaos is never fully gone. It lurks beneath the surface, waiting, and that tension between the order we crave and the chaos we fear still resonates today. Every time we see a storm and feel that primal awe, we're touching the same emotions that once made the Greeks look to Zeus and whisper his name like a prayer. This tale of gods and monsters is more than just an ancient bedtime story. It's a mirror held up to humanity's deepest anxieties and our unshakable hope that light will always somehow hold back the dark. Beneath the scorching Egyptian sun, where the Nile's lifeblood met the desert's endless sands, a divine drama unfolded, one that would echo through millennia. Osiris, the wise and benevolent god-king, ruled with such grace that even the earth flourished under his touch. crops grew abundant, laws were just, and chaos dared not show its face. But darkness slithered in where light shone brightest. His own brother, Set, the god of storms and disorder, coveted the throne with a jealousy that festered into violence. One fateful night, Set devised a trap as cruel as it was cunning. At a grand feast, he unveiled a golden chest crafted to fit only Osiris' form. Whoever fits inside, he declared, shall claim it as a prize. Laughing, the gods took turns until Osiris stepped forward. The moment he lay within, Set's conspirators slammed the lid shut, sealing him inside. The chest was hurled into the Nile, where the currents carried Osiris far from the land he loved. But this wasn't just a murder, it was an unraveling. Without Osiris, the fields withered, the rivers turned bitter, the world mourned. Yet where there is despair, there is also Isis. Osiris, queen, goddess of magic and protector of the broken, refused to let chaos win. With wings spread like a falcon, she scoured the Nile's length until she found the chest entangled in reeds. But Set wasn't finished. Discovering her triumph, he tore Osiris' body into 14 pieces, scattering them across Egypt. What followed wasn't just a search, it was the first sacred act of reassembly. Isis, with her sister Nephthys, gathered every fragment, weaving spells so potent they stitched flesh back to bone. When the jackal-headed Anubis came forth to anoint the body with resins and linen, the first mummy was born. Here's the miracle: Osiris didn't return to rule the living. He became lord of the dead, reigning in the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, where he welcomed souls judged worthy. His resurrection wasn't just a myth, it was a blueprint. Every mummification ritual mirrored Isis magic. Every amulet placed on a corpse whispered her spells. And when farmers buried seeds in the earth, they saw Osiris' story repeat. Death, then rebirth, as barley sprouted from darkened soil. This tale isn't just about a god's murder. It's about the unyielding power of devotion, the promise that not even death is the end. The Egyptians didn't just believe in the afterlife, they lived by its hope. To walk through a tomb's painted halls was to see the universe's secret, that love and magic could defy even the darkest fate. And perhaps that's why Osiris' story still chills and thrills us today. Because deep down, we all long to believe that what is broken can be made whole again. The waves crashed against the boat like the fists of giants, and Thor's laughter boomed over the storm as he gripped the fishing line with knuckles white as sea foam. This wasn't just a fishing trip, it was a reckless gamble with fate itself. The Norse gods knew their destiny. Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods, loomed on the horizon like an unshakable shadow. And coiled beneath the ocean's depths, waiting, lurked Jörmungandr, the world serpent, whose very breath could poison the seas. Thor, ever the thunderous hero, refused to cower before prophecy. With his giant companion Hymir, he sailed into the roughest waters, baiting his hook with the head of Hymir's prized ox, a lure fit for a beast destined to swallow the world. The moment Jörmungandr clamped down, the ocean erupted. Water surged like a collapsing mountain as the serpent's gargantuan body thrashed, its scales scraping against the hull like 1,000 swords. Thor, muscles straining, hauled the line with godly might, his feet digging into the boat's planks until they splintered. For a heartbeat, the serpent's head breached the surface, eyes burning with venomous rage, fangs dripping with the promise of apocalypse. Hymir, trembling at the sight, cut the line in terror, and with a splash that sent tidal waves across the 9 realms, Jörmungandr sank back into the abyss. Thor's roar of frustration shook the heavens, but the message was clear: even the gods couldn't cheat fate. The Norse didn't tell this story to glorify victory. They told it to show their gods as flawed, brave, and bound by the same inexorable forces as mortals. Thor's arrogance mirrored human stubbornness, his failure a reminder that some battles can only be delayed, not won. Yet there's dark humor here too, the image of the mighty god of thunder, red-bearded and furious, tricked into fishing like a common villager, only to lose his prize to a coward's blade. It's a scene so vivid you can almost smell the salt and hear the creak of the boat. But beneath the laughter lies a chilling truth. Every struggle against Jörmungandr, every near victory, only brings Ragnarök closer. The serpent's poison will one day fill Thor's lungs, and the world will drown in its wake. The Norse didn't flinch from this truth. They met it with ale in their horns and courage in their hearts, teaching us that heroism isn't about winning. It's about facing the inevitable with eyes wide open. And perhaps that's why this tale, steeped in storm and doom, still thrills us today. It's not just a myth, it's a mirror. We all have our own Jörmungandr lurking in the depths, our own battles we fight knowing we might not prevail. Thor's fishing trip is a reminder. Some lines are meant to be cast, even if they can never be reeled in. The world plunged into shadow as Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess of Shinto belief, vanished into a celestial cave, sealing the entrance with a boulder so massive not even the strongest storm could move it. What began as a petty squabble with her tempestuous brother Susanoo had spiraled into an act of divine withdrawal, one that left the earth frozen, crops withering, and humanity trembling in unending night. Without her light, the kami or spirits grew weak, colors faded, laughter died. This wasn't just a tantrum, it was the unraveling of creation itself. Yet the gods knew despair was useless. If force couldn't coax Amaterasu out, perhaps mischief could. The clever kami Useum, goddess of dawn and revelry, hatched a plan as audacious as it was joyous. She overturned a wooden tub near the cave's entrance, climbed atop it, and began a dance so shamelessly exuberant that the very stars leaned closer to watch. Useum's feet stomped rhythms into the earth, her sleeves whirling like swallows in flight. Then, as the other gods erupted in raucous cheers, she did the unthinkable. She shed her robes, spinning naked under the heavens, her laughter contagious. The kami roared with such delight that the sound rattled the cave's walls. Curiosity gnawed at Amaterasu. How could her kin celebrate while the world languished in darkness? Peering through a crack in the boulder, she demanded an explanation. "We've found a goddess brighter than you," Useum lied, gesturing to a mirror polished to blinding perfection. When Amaterasu stepped closer, her own dazzling reflection stunned her, long enough for the gods to seize her and haul her back into the sky. Light flooded the earth anew, banishing the endless night. But this myth isn't just about the sun's return. It's a masterclass in Shinto philosophy, where harmony isn't forced but coaxed forth through joy, cleverness, and communal effort. The mirror used to trick Amaterasu. It became one of Japan's 3 sacred treasures, symbolizing truth's brilliance. Useum's dance, it birthed Kagyura, the ritual performances still offered at shrines today to honor the kami. Even Amaterasu's retreat carries meaning. Shinto teaches that light must sometimes withdraw to remind us of its priceless worth. What's haunting is how modern this ancient tale feels. Don't we all know someone who, wounded, retreats into emotional caves? Aren't the best solutions often not confrontation, but creativity and laughter? Amaterasu's story whispers that darkness isn't permanent if we're willing to dance in the shadows until the light returns. The wind howled through the desolate 5th Sun era, a time when the earth lay barren and humanity had not yet drawn breath. High above, the gods gathered in the sacred city of Teotihuacan, faced with an impossible question: who would become the sun to banish eternal night? The answer came from Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, whose jade scales shimmered with wisdom and whose heart burned not with conquest but compassion. While other gods hesitated, he stepped forward into the divine fire, his body dissolving into radiant light that ignited the dawn. But his sacrifice didn't end there. To create humans worthy of this new world, Quetzalcoatl descended into Mictlan, the underworld, where bones of past civilizations gathered dust. Braving rivers of blood and mountains of blades, he tricked the Lord of Death to reclaim these skeletal remnants. Then came the act that would forever bind him to humanity, mixing the bones with his own blood and sacred maize, the lifeblood of Mesoamerica. Unlike other Aztec gods who demanded hearts torn from living chests, Quetzalcoatl offered his essence willingly. When he blew breath into the mixture, humanity awoke not as slaves, but as beings infused with divine corn and the serpent's own spirit. This myth pulses with layers of meaning. Maize wasn't just a crop to the Aztecs, it was a holy gift woven into their creation story. Corn kernels were quite literally the flesh of people, explaining why warriors carried maize into battle to honor their very composition. Yet Quetzalcoatl's kindness starkly contrasts with deities like Huitzilopochtli, who thirsted for constant war and sacrifice. Some scholars believe this duality reflects Aztec society's own tensions between the scholar priests who revered knowledge and the warriors who fed the sun with blood. What's haunting is how the story twists in later tellings. When Spanish conquistadors arrived, many Aztec accounts merged Quetzalcoatl with their pale-skinned invaders, believing the gentle god had returned to reclaim his kingdom. The irony is crushing. The deity who rejected bloodshed became the symbol of a cultural cataclysm drenched in it. Yet even today, Mexican folklore whispers of his eventual return, a promise that benevolence might one day outweigh brutality. The next time you bite into a tortilla or sip atol, remember, you're tasting more than maize. You're savoring the remains of a god who chose creation over dominion, whose sacrifice still grows in every golden stalk. And perhaps that's the ultimate lesson. True divinity isn't about taking life but giving it. The Himalayas shuddered as Shiva, the ascetic god of paradoxes, began his dance. This was no ordinary performance. It was the Tandava, a whirl of motion so fierce it could shatter stars. With his matted locks flying and third eye blazing, each stamp of his foot cracked mountains, while the rhythm of his damaru drum pulsed like the universe's own heartbeat. To mortal eyes, it looked like annihilation, but in Hindu cosmology, destruction was never the end, only the precursor to rebirth. Shiva's dance wasn't mindless fury. Every gesture held meaning, his raised hand warding off fear, the flame in his palm symbolizing transformation, the serpent around his neck whispering of cycles. Even the skulls adorning his neck told a story. They were the remnants of old universes, ground to dust so new ones could rise. The gods themselves watched in awe, knowing this dance kept existence from stagnating. Without destruction, there could be no creation. Without endings, no beginnings. Nowhere is this duality more visceral than in Kali's legend. When the demon Raktabija threatened the cosmos, each drop of his blood spawning new clones, the gods summoned Kali, the black-skinned goddess of time and chaos. She emerged not as a benevolent mother but as fury incarnate, her tongue lolling red, her necklace of severed heads clattering as she sliced through Raktabija's armies. But victory tipped into madness. Drunk on bloodlust, Kali's rampage threatened to consume the world itself. Enter Shiva once more, this time as the ultimate paradox, a pacifier through absurdity. Knowing brute force couldn't stop Kali, he lay down in her path. The moment her foot touched his chest, she froze, recoiling in horrified awareness. Some versions say she bit her own tongue in shame. Others claim Shiva's stillness mirrored back her own boundless energy, restoring balance. Together, they embodied Hinduism's core truth. Chaos and calm aren't opposites but interdependent forces. Kali standing atop Shiva isn't just an image, it's a cosmic blueprint. Her wild hair and weapons show nature's untamed power. His serene face beneath her feet represents the stillness underlying all motion. Modern Hindus still honor this duality during festivals like Navratri, where joyful dances precede moments of meditative silence. Even science echoes this wisdom. Supernovas destroy to create new elements, forests burn to fertilize soil. These tales unsettle Western audiences raised on tidy morals of good vanquishing evil. But in Hindu thought, darkness isn't something to defeat. It's a phase to navigate, like monsoon rains that both flood and nourish. Next time you see a wilted flower, remember, it isn't dying. It's making room for the bloom to come. Deep in the golden forests of West Africa, where fireflies flickered like scattered embers, a tiny spider named Anansi wove more than just webs, he spun schemes. The sky god Niame guarded all the world's stories in a golden box, hoarding their wisdom for himself. But Anansi, no bigger than a thumbprint, believed stories belonged to everyone. His plan wasn't one of brute strength, it was a masterpiece of mischief, a cascade of cleverness that would redefine trickery itself. First, he needed leverage. Niame demanded impossible things: a swarm of stinging hornets, a leopard with teeth like daggers, and a fairy so elusive she could vanish like morning mist. To a lesser being, these tasks would spell doom. But Anansi's mind worked in loops and knots. For the hornets, he filled a gourd with water, pretended to weep over its stupidity for not raining, and convinced the curious insects to crawl inside to investigate. The leopard, Anansi carved wooden pegs into the ground, suggesting they were part of a new game, and when the cat stretched to test them, he bound her paws mid-yawn. As for the fairy, he molded sticky gum into a doll, placed yams in its lap, and when the fairy scolded the child for not sharing, her lips sealed shut against the trap. Each captured prize was delivered to Niame with a bow, and each time the sky god's frown deepened. He'd been outwitted by a creature smaller than his thumbnail. Reluctantly, he surrendered the golden box, but here's the twist: Anansi didn't keep the stories for himself. He spilled them across the land, letting them take root in every village where Griot's oral historians would chant them for generations. Anansi's tales are deliciously ambiguous. Is he a hero for democratizing knowledge, or a rogue who thrives on chaos? One story tells of him hoarding all common sense in a pot, only to shatter it against a tree, scattering fragments so no single person could ever claim to be wise. Another reveals his greed backfiring when he tries to carry an entire feast up a tree by tying dishes to his limbs, only to be picked clean by vultures. The Akan people didn't paint him as purely good or evil. He was life itself, clever, flawed, and endlessly adaptable. What makes these stories endure isn't just their humor. Their survival guides wrapped in silk. Anansi teaches that the powerless can outthink the mighty, that humor disarms tyranny, and that wisdom often hides in the last place you'd look. Even today, when parents tell children of the spider who tricked a god, they're passing down more than folklore, they're gifting a legacy of resilience. Because in a world where strength isn't fair, sometimes the best tool is a well-spun lie. The earth itself held its breath the day Persephone vanished. One moment she was gathering narcissus flowers in a sunlit meadow, their petals white as moonlit marble. The next, the ground split open with a roar, and Hades' chariot surged upward, black horses flecked with starlight. His hand closed around her wrist, not with brutality, but with the certainty of a king claiming his due. To the ancient Greeks, this wasn't just a kidnapping. It was the moment the world learned seasons had a price. Demeter's grief scorched the land like wildfire. As goddess of the harvest, her sorrow turned vines to kindling and wheat fields to cracked wastelands. Mortals starved, temples stood empty. Even Zeus, who'd secretly approved Hades' suit, couldn't ignore the devastation. Yet when Hermes descended to the underworld to retrieve Persephone, they discovered a twist that would echo through millennia. She'd eaten 6 pomegranate seeds in the land of the dead, binding her to return for 6 months each year. This myth is often reduced to a simple seasonal explanation. Persephone's descent bringing winter, her ascent bringing spring. But the Eleusinian mysteries, secret rites performed for nearly 2,000 years, hint at darker, richer layers. Initiates drank kykeon, a barley brew possibly laced with psychedelics, before entering torch-lit temple chambers where Persephone's story was reenacted. Those who emerged swore never to reveal what they witnessed, but ancient texts whisper of apoptic visions, glimpses of the afterlife so profound they erased the fear of death. Modern scholars suspect these rituals promised what the myth withholds: Persephone's agency. feminist retellings reclaim her narrative from victimhood. Was she truly abducted, or did she choose the underworld's sovereignty over her mother's smothering light? The Homeric hymn describes her laughter ringing through Hades' halls, an unsettling detail for those who paint her as a passive captive. Contemporary poets like Louise Gluck reframe the story as a daughter's necessary rebellion, her consumption of pomegranate seeds not a trap but a claim to power. What else could she do, being a woman? She could fuck a god and become a legend. Perhaps the most haunting legacy lies in agriculture's rhythm. Ancient farmers didn't just accept winter, they revered it as Persephone's sacred time below, when seeds gestated in darkness like souls awaiting rebirth. The Thesmophoria festival saw women burying rotted pig flesh to fertilize next year's crops, mirroring Demeter's mourning and Persephone's cyclical resurrection. Even today, when we bite into autumn's first apple or watch crocuses push through frost, we're tasting the oldest truth of all. That loss and renewal are two sides of the same coin, forever spinning in Persephone's palm. The children of Polynesia used to weep as they watched their mothers' hands blister from endless days of labor, days that burned too fast to dry top a cloth, days that vanished before fish could be smoked, days that left no time to save a life under the sky's vast blue bowl. The sun raced across the heavens like a careless god, never pausing, never resting, leaving villages gasping in its wake, until Maui, the trickster demigod with a laugh as wide as the horizon, decided enough was enough. Armed with nothing but his grandmother's magical jawbone and ropes woven from his sister's hair fibers strong enough to snare legends, Maui led his brothers on a journey to the sun's rising place. They traveled not by canoe, but by slipping into the underworld, moving unseen beneath the earth's crust until they reached the pit where the sun dragged itself each morning. As dawn's first rays clawed over the edge, Maui sprang. His lasso whirled through the air, its knots tightening around the sun's fiery limbs. The great star roared, lashing like a hooked marlin, but Maui held fast, his brothers anchoring the ropes with all their strength. What happened next wasn't just a battle, it was a negotiation. Maui didn't seek to kill the sun, only to tame its haste. With the jawbone as his club, he struck deal after deal, each blow carving longer hours into the day. The sun, panting, finally agreed. It would move slower in summer, granting time for feasts and fishing, and faster in winter, allowing the earth to rest. The legend lives in the slackened pace of tropical afternoons, in the way light lingers golden on the waves, but Maui's triumph isn't just about daylight. To Polynesian navigators whose canoes crossed thousands of miles guided by stars and swells, the story encoded vital wisdom. The sun's path wasn't arbitrary, it was a rhythm to be studied, a force that could be engaged with rather than feared. Modern sailors still use the term Maui's snare to describe harnessing wind patterns, a nod to the demigod's lesson that nature's power isn't meant to break us but to bend with us. Across Hawaii, Tahiti, and Aotearoa, variations of this tale paint Maui as both hero and provocateur. In some versions, his brothers betray him, cutting the ropes too soon. In others, the sun leaves permanent burns on his arms as punishment for his audacity. Yet every telling agrees on one thing: Maui's defiance reshaped the world for ordinary people. He didn't perform miracles for glory. He fought so a mother could knead bread without chasing light, so a child could hear one more story before nightfall. Perhaps that's why his name still echoes across the Pacific, whispered in chants and etched into tattoos. The slow arc of the sun isn't just a celestial fact, it's a reminder that even the mightiest forces can be moved by someone brave enough to demand better. Maui didn't just lasso a star, he taught humanity to reach for the impossible, one woven rope at a time. Before time had shape and the islands of Japan were mere specks in the primordial soup of creation, two deities emerged from the swirling chaos: Izanagi, the god of life and light, and Izanami, the goddess of death and darkness. Their dance began on the floating bridge of heaven, a place between realms where existence itself trembled with possibility. Armed with a jeweled spear, Izanagi stirred the briny waters below. When he lifted it, droplets cascaded back into the sea, hardening into the first land, Onagoro, the self-forming island. This wasn't just geography springing to life. It was the birth of a sacred partnership, a divine collaboration where male and female energies intertwined to shape the world. Their union should have been eternal. Side by side, they circled the pillar of the heavens, Izanami speaking first in greeting, a breach of ancient ritual that would unravel everything. When their first child, Haruko, was born deformed, they realized their mistake. The gods had decreed that the man must initiate the sacred union. Izanami's forwardness had poisoned the balance. They repeated the ritual correctly, and this time the islands of Japan rose in breathtaking succession, each one pulsing with life, but fate had already been set in motion. During the birth of Kagetsuchi, the fire god, Izanami's body burned so terribly that her flesh blackened like charred wood. As she died, her final breaths gave rise to new deities, metalsmiths from her vomit, river gods from her urine, even agricultural spirits from her excrement. Even in death, she continued creating. Izanagi's grief was a tempest that shook the heavens. Drawing his sword, he beheaded Kagetsuchi in a single stroke, the fire god's blood spawning yet more gods. But rage couldn't fill the void Izanami left. Against all warnings, Izanagi descended into Yomi, the shadowy underworld, determined to retrieve her. What he found there shattered him. Izanami was no longer the radiant goddess he remembered. Rot clung to her once luminous skin, her hair writhed with maggots, and her eyes held only hollow darkness. She had eaten the food of Yomi, binding her to its domain forever. When Izanagi recoiled in horror, her love curdled into fury. She unleashed the 8 thunders and an army of rotting Shikome corpse women to chase him back to the land of the living. His escape became the stuff of nightmares. Blocking the underworld's exit with a boulder, Izanagi severed their bond with a proclamation that still echoes in Shinto shrines. He would take 1,000 souls to the world of the living each day, while she claimed 1,500 for the dead. But the true legacy of their story lies in the rituals it inspired. When Izanagi purged himself of Yomi's pollution in a river, his cleansing gave birth to misogi, the practice of ritual washing that remains central to Shinto worship. Every torii gate, every rinse of hands at a shrine's temazuya, every priest's purification ceremony traces back to that moment when the god scrubbed death from his skin. Modern visitors to Japan unknowingly walk in Izanagi's footsteps. The taboo against looking upon the dead mirrors his fatal glance at Izanami's decay. The separation of birth and death in Shinto, where temples avoid funerals, reflects their fractured union. Even the way sushi chefs rinse their hands before touching rice carries the echo of a god's desperate ablutions. This tale isn't just about creation and loss. It's a map of how the Japanese people learned to navigate a world where beauty and decay are forever entwined. To stand before a cherry blossom in full bloom is to witness Izanagi's fleeting triumph. To watch those same petals fall is to remember Izanami's embrace waiting just beneath the earth. The black waters of the Nun, the primordial abyss, swirled ominously as Ra's golden solar bark departed the western horizon. For the Egyptians, sunset wasn't simply the end of a day. It marked the beginning of the most perilous journey in the cosmos. Each night, the sun god navigated the 12 caverns of the Juat, an underworld teeming with fire lakes, inverted gods and corpses who reached for his light with skeletal fingers. But the true terror lurked in the 7th hour, where Apophis, the serpent of oblivion, coiled in wait. Stretching the length of the night sky, this embodiment of chaos sought to swallow Ra whole, plunging the world into eternal darkness. Ra's struggle wasn't a solitary one. Standing at the prow of the bark with a net woven from magic, Set, the god of storms and violence, speared Apophis with relentless fury. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, cast binding spells, while Mehen, the serpent god, encircled the solar bark as a living shield. Even the souls of the dead joined the battle, their chants rising from tomb walls to strengthen Ra's arm. This wasn't just myth, it was theology carved into the very stones of pyramids. The pyramid texts, some of humanity's oldest religious writings, preserve these spells. Ra lives, Apophis falls. The sun ascends, chaos is struck down. Pharaohs didn't merely observe this cosmic drama, they participated in it. Royal tombs were inscribed with Amjuat, the book of what is in the underworld, mapping each hour of Ra's journey. When a king died, his soul merged with Ra, navigating the Juat to prove his worthiness for resurrection. Scenes in Luxor's tombs depict pharaohs wielding Kopish swords against Apophis, their victories ensuring the sun's rebirth at dawn. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If Apophis triumphed, the Nile would run dry, crops would wither, and Mat, the sacred order of the universe, would crumble. What's haunting is how tangible this belief became. Priests performed nightly rituals, smashing pots painted with Apophis' likeness to symbolically shatter chaos. The Book of the Dead included spells to transform the deceased into allies of Ra, promising, "You shall tread on the serpent's spine, you shall shine as the dawn." Even the pyramid's alignment mirrored Ra's path. Their eastern faces caught the first light, symbolizing the sun's rebirth through the king's eternal soul. This tale isn't just about a god's survival. It's about humanity's oldest obsession, the fragile line between order and annihilation. Every sunrise was a victory hard-won, a reassurance that light could outlast the longest night. Modern astronomers note an eerie parallel. Our sun does battle with cosmic forces too, solar flares lashing out like Ra's spears against the void. Maybe that's why this myth endures. Because deep down, we still hold our breath at dusk, hoping the light will return. The ice groaned beneath the old hunter's feet as he dragged his daughter toward the kayak, her pleas lost in the howling wind. Sedna had refused every suitor from their village, sparking whispers that her pride would doom them all. But when a mysterious birdman arrived with promises of soft furs and endless food, even her father couldn't ignore the chance to be rid of her. What began as a hopeful journey became a nightmare. The creature's true form, revealed as feathered wings, melted into greasy black flesh, his nest a reeking mound of rotting fish bones. As Sedna screamed, her father came for her, not with comfort but with a harpoon's sharp edge. Panic turned the sea to frenzy. With his daughter clinging to the kayak's side, the hunter hacked at her fingers as she thrashed. One by one, her severed joints plunged into the depths, each transforming into whales, seals, and walruses, creatures that would sustain the Inuit for generations. Sedna herself sank to Adlivon, the icy underworld, where her rage and sorrow twisted into a power so vast, she became the mother and judge of all marine life. Now when storms choke the hunting grounds or game grows scarce, shamans must descend in spirit to comb the tangles from her hair, soothing the goddess whose severed limbs feed the very people who betrayed her. This isn't just a story of vengeance, it's a brutal lesson in reciprocity. Inuit hunters still whisper apologies to slain seals, offering them fresh water to honor Sedna's sacrifice. A dropped catch is returned to the ocean, lest the goddess starve her children in retaliation. The tale etches a chilling truth into daily survival. Nature gives only when respected, and hubris cracks the ice beneath your feet. Modern ecologists see Sedna's legacy in Inuit-led conservation, their ancestral knowledge protecting Arctic ecosystems from overfishing. But her myth also mirrors humanity's fraught dance with the natural world. We are all the desperate hunter, the mutilated goddess, and the starving child by turns, forever balancing taking with giving, betrayal with atonement. When sea ice melts and species vanish, it's Sedna's voice that howls through the thinning flows, a reminder that every resource comes clawed from something or someone else. High in the freezing branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree, Odin dangled for 9 endless nights, his own spear Gungnir piercing his side as a gruesome offering. Below him gaped the well of Urd, its black waters whispering with the wisdom of the ages, but Mimir, the severed head guarding it, demanded more than blood. One eye he rasped, pluck it out and drink deep. Without hesitation, the Allfather tore his own eye free, dropping it into the well with a splash that echoed through all 9 realms. That single sacrifice unlocked the rune's secrets, gifting him knowledge of fate's tapestry. Yet here's the cruel twist. Even as Odin gained foresight, he saw Ragnarok's doom looming, unstoppable and inevitable. This paradox lies at the heart of Norse belief, that wisdom and suffering are 2 sides of the same blade. Odin didn't just lose an eye, he gained the burden of seeing futures he couldn't change. His ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, now bring him whispers of every mortal's end. Yet he intervenes only to steer heroes toward glorious deaths that might delay the inevitable. The Valkyries don't harvest souls, they recruit soldiers for the final battle, stacking the odds against chaos while knowing the fight is already lost. Now shift the scene to a cave slick with damp shadows, where Loki, the trickster bound by Odin's own blood, oath fathers horrors that will define the apocalypse. With the giantess Angerboda, he sires Fenrir, a wolf so vast his jaws stretch from earth to sky. Jörmungandr, the serpent who circles Midgard, tail clamped in its own teeth, and Hel, whose half-living face presides over the dishonored dead. These aren't mere monsters, their inevitability given form. The gods themselves raise them, blinded by arrogance. Odin chains Fenrir with unbreakable ribbon, only for the wolf's snapping jaws to sever his hand at Ragnarok. Thor fishes up Jörmungandr, then drops him back into the sea, ensuring their fatal duel will one day poison the skies. Even Hel's underworld isn't a punishment but a necessity, a place to house those unworthy of Valhalla's feast halls. What chills the bones about these tales isn't the gore or the scale, it's the resignation. The Norse gods aren't battling for victory, they're preparing for a defeat they've already foreseen. Odin's sacrifice mirrors humanity's own struggle. We hunger for knowledge, yet the more we learn, the heavier our understanding of mortality becomes. Loki's children remind us that some forces can't be bargained with, only faced with courage when the time comes. Modern psychiatrists note how Norse fatalism mirrors depression's grip, the sense of battling something preordained. But there's nobility here too. The Vikings didn't cower before destiny, they drank mead in its shadow, carving life bravely into every saga. When today's soldiers wear Mjolnir pendants or gamers choose Odin in Valhalla-themed battles, they're tapping into that same defiant spirit. Because the lesson isn't that the end matters, it's that how you face it does. So the next time you stare into life's abyss, remember Odin's hollow socket and Loki's howling brood. Wisdom won't save you, but it might steel your spine for the storm to come. And in the end, that's all any god or mortal can ask for. Before time had shape, when the cosmos was nothing but swirling saltwater and darkness, the mother of all monsters stirred in the depths. Tiamat, the primordial dragon of chaos, coiled her serpentine body through the abyss, her scales glistening like oil on water. Her roars birthed storms, her tears spawned rivers, and her very presence was the pulse of creation itself. But when her divine children, the younger gods, grew restless, their laughter and mischief shaking the foundations of the void, Tiamat's love curdled into wrath. She birthed an army of horrors, scorpion men with venom-dripping tails, lion demons with eyes of fire, and her champion, the 11-headed Kingu, who she dressed in the cloak of destiny itself. The universe trembled on the edge of annihilation. Enter Marduk, the storm god whose name meant bull calf of the sun. Unlike the elder gods who cowered before Tiamat's rage, this young deity stepped forward with a demand that echoed through the heavens. If he defeated her, he would rule unchallenged. Armed with his grandfather's winds, a net woven from stars, and the invincible mace Marduk, he faced the dragon in a battle that would define existence. Lightning split the sky as Tiamat opened her maw to swallow him whole, but Marduk hurled the winds down her throat, inflating her body until she could no longer strike. With a single arrow of divine light, he pierced her heart, then split her corpse like a clamshell. From her ribs he arched the sky, from her liver he placed the pole star. Her tears became the Tigris and Euphrates, flowing through the land that would one day cradle Babylon itself. But this wasn't just a creation myth, it was a political manifesto written in celestial blood. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian epic recording this battle, was recited annually at the New Year festival, reinforcing Marduk's supremacy as Babylon rose to power. Just as he had tamed chaos, so too did Babylonian kings position themselves as bringers of order, their victories mirroring Marduk's conquest. The tale's parallels are striking. Like Zeus battling Typhon or Indra slaying Vritra, storm gods across cultures personified their struggles against nature's unpredictability. Yet Tiamat's fate carries a haunting irony. The mother of all life became the scaffolding for her own killer's dominion. Modern scholars see deeper layers in her demise. Feminist readings highlight Tiamat as a dethroned matriarch, her body literally carved into patriarchy's infrastructure. Ecologists note how the myth justified humanity's domination over nature, a theme that still echoes in today's climate crises. Yet fragments of her legacy endure. When Mesopotamian priests poured libations into the earth, they honored not just Marduk's victory, but the primal goddess whose flesh fed their world. Perhaps that's the true lesson of this ancient war. Even in triumph, order can never fully erase the chaos that birthed it. The next time you gaze at the stars, remember, they're not just lights in the sky, but the bones of a dragon. Hera's golden throne sat empty as she paced the halls of Olympus, her footfalls echoing like distant thunder. The Queen of Gods had perfected the art of silent fury. Her husband Zeus left trails of infidelity across the mortal world, yet the blame always seemed to coil back around her neck. Take Io, the priestess whose only crime was catching Zeus' wandering eye. When Hera stormed toward them, her husband panicked, transforming Io into a snow-white heifer. "A gift for you, my love," he offered, as if Hera wouldn't recognize the terror in those bovine eyes. The goddess played along, placing Io under the 100-eyed watch of Argus. Every time the poor girl tried to graze, Hera sent stinging flies to drive her across continents, until Io's hooves wore down from Greece to Egypt. Then there was Leto, heavy with Zeus' twins, denied shelter on every land for fear of Hera's wrath. The queen had sworn no sunlit earth would harbor his mistress, leaving Leto to stagger through swamps and rocky wastes until the floating island of Delos took pity. Even then, Hera delayed the birth by kidnapping Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth, until the other deities intervened. The pattern repeated with Semele, Callisto, Alcmene, each woman paying the price for Zeus' appetites while he faced no consequences. But here's what the myths often omit. Hera wasn't born a villain. In pre-Olympian traditions, she reigned as a powerful earth goddess before being absorbed into Zeus' pantheon and demoted to jealous wife. Scholars argue her torment of Zeus lovers reflects the systemic erasure of matriarchal deities. Her rage isn't petty jealousy, but the fury of a dethroned sovereign forced to police the very system that subjugated her. Modern retellings are finally peeling back the patriarchal layers. When poets like Madeline Miller rewrite Hera's perspective, her curses become the logical retaliation of a cornered deity. The ancients called her vengeful, but never questioned why Zeus' betrayals warranted no divine punishment. Perhaps the true myth isn't Hera's cruelty, but how history transformed a wronged goddess into a cautionary tale about women who refused to suffer in silence. Next time you hear of Hera's wrath, ask whose narrative you're inheriting: the conquerors who demonized her, or the queen who refused to let Olympus forget its hypocrisy. The waters of Lake Titicaca shimmered under the dawn light, silent and still until the moment they weren't. With a surge that sent ripples racing to distant shores, a figure rose from the depths, his beard glistening with droplets older than time itself. This was Viracocha, the Incan creator god, stepping onto the shores of the Andes not with pomp but with purpose. Unlike other deities who shaped the world with thunderbolts or blood sacrifices, Viracocha worked like a sculptor whispering to clay. He traced his fingers across the barren earth, and where they lingered, terraces erupted like stairways to the heavens. He breathed into stone, and the rocks shuddered into life as the first people of the Andes. But Viracocha's greatest marvel wasn't just creation, it was instruction. He wandered the land in disguise, a ragged traveler testing the hearts of those he'd made. To the arrogant, he brought drought. To the kind, he gifted quipu knots, a language of strings that would become the Incan Empire's memory. His final act was as mysterious as his arrival. After lighting the torch of civilization across the mountains, he walked westward into the Pacific, his footsteps dissolving into foam as he promised one day to return. When Spanish conquistadors heard this tale centuries later, their pens scratched feverishly. Here was a bearded god who vanished into the sea, just like the Aztecs' Quetzalcoatl. Could they exploit the prophecy? They tried, claiming their pale skin fulfilled Viracocha's return, a cruel twist that aided their conquest, but the Andean people knew better. Their flood myths told of Viracocha unleashing waters to purge a corrupted world, sparing only two who repopulated the earth. Unlike the biblical Noah, these survivors weren't chosen for piety, but for their connection to the land, their knowledge of seeds and stars. Modern archaeologists still puzzle over the parallels. Beneath Lake Titicaca's surface lie ruins of a civilization far older than the Incas, perhaps the real-world echo of Viracocha's first creations. And those quipu knots, scholars once dismissed them as mere accounting tools until they found evidence they might encode poetry, laws, even prophecies. The god who spoke in strings left behind a puzzle we're still unraveling. So was Viracocha a deity, a memory of ancient migrants, or something else entirely? The answer might lie in the way Andean farmers still pour chicha beer onto the earth before planting. A libation to the wanderer who taught them that creation isn't a one-time act, but a debt repaid with each harvest. The heavens had never seen chaos like this. Sun Wukong, the Monkey King born from stone, fed on immortal peaches and tempered in Laozi's furnace, swung his staff Rui Jingu bang with a roar that shook the stars. One moment he was a lowly stable hand in the celestial bureaucracy. The next he was flipping tables in the halls of the Jade Emperor himself. His crime? Refusing to kneel. His punishment? None could touch him. With 72 transformations at his command, mastery over wind and cloud, and an army of monkey spirits at his back, he declared himself great sage equal to heaven, and meant every word. This wasn't just rebellion, it was cosmic satire. The celestial court, with its rigid hierarchies and stuffy protocols, mirrored the imperial bureaucracy of Ming Dynasty China. Wukong's aunties stealing the peaches of immortality, guzzling the wine of the gods, even scribbling his name over Laozi's sacred texts were a middle finger to authority itself. When the Jade Emperor's armies failed, he called in Buddha as a last resort. The enlightened one didn't raise a fist. Instead, he extended an open palm, offering a wager. If Wukong could leap beyond his reach, heaven would be his. The Monkey King somersaulted 108,000 leagues in a single bound, only to find himself still crouching between Buddha's fingers. With a flick, he was pinned under 5 Elements Mountain, where he'd stew for 5 centuries until a certain monk needed an escort west. What makes this myth endure isn't just the spectacle, it's the layers. Wukong embodies the Taoist ideal of Wu-Wei, effortless action flowing like water around obstacles, yet his containment by Buddha reflects Confucian and Buddhist values of discipline and humility. The Journey to the West novel, which immortalized his tale, became a masterclass in syncretism, blending Taoist immortals, Buddhist saints, and folk deities into a single pilgrimage. Even his golden headband, tightened by chanting sutras, symbolizes how rebellion is ultimately tempered by wisdom. Modern readers might recognize Wukong in every underdog story, from Dragon Ball's Goku to Disney's rebellious protagonists. But in China, his legacy runs deeper. Opera troupes still paint their faces red and gold to play him. Tech startups adopt his name for their agility, and censored artists sneak his likeness into protest art, a coded nod to defiance. The Monkey King reminds us that even the mightiest gates of heaven have hinges, and sometimes all it takes is a clever trickster to pry them open. Freya's chariot cut through the battlefield at dawn, drawn not by horses but by two massive cats whose fur shimmered like molten gold. The Norse goddess of love rode into war with a falcon feather cloak fluttering at her shoulders and a necklace forged by dwarves, the Brisingamen glowing against her throat like captured moonlight. But beneath the armor and the war cries lay a sorrow older than Valhalla's feasts. When her husband Otter vanished into the winds, wandering the world like a leaf torn from a branch, Freya wept tears that hardened into amber as they touched the earth. Each golden drop carried the weight of her dual nature, tenderness that could drown continents and fury that could split mountains. These weren't just tears, they were a language. Vikings combing Scandinavian beaches found Freya's grief turned to treasure. The amber pieces warmed to the touch as if still holding her sorrow. They strung them into necklaces, believing the stones could ward off evil and heal broken hearts. But Freya's magic ran deeper than gemstones. As mistress of Seidr, a form of Norse sorcery so potent even Odin coveted it, she could unravel fate's threads with a whisper. Shield maidens sought her blessings before battle, not just for victory, but for the vision to see beyond bloodshed. Here's the paradox: the same goddess who taught women to weave spells also rode among the slain, claiming half the dead for her hall Sessrumnir, while Odin took the rest. Love and death, creation and destruction, Freya embodied the razor's edge between them. Modern eyes might dismiss her as a warped archetype femininity wrapped in weaponry. But the Norse saw no contradiction. A woman could weep golden tears one moment and command armies the next. Seidr itself blurred boundaries, deemed unmanly yet practiced by warriors seeking advantage. When Viking traders carried amber down the Silk Road, they weren't just selling trinkets, they were trading fragments of Freya's shattered heart, each piece proof that strength and softness could coexist. Perhaps that's why her myth endures. In a world still wrestling with rigid gender roles, Freya stands as a reminder: power doesn't come in halves. You can mourn deeply and fight fiercely, love boundlessly and demand respect unflinchingly. The next time you hold a piece of amber to the light, watch how it glows not just with trapped sunlight, but with the fire of a goddess who refused to choose between her many selves. The world lay frozen in perpetual twilight, its people huddled miserably around feeble embers that barely staved off the cold. Fire belonged to the selfish fire beings, greedy spirits who hoarded its warmth atop a distant mountain, laughing as mortals shivered below. But Coyote, the trickster with 1,000 faces and no rules, watched the suffering with restless cunning. Not out of pity alone, though he felt that too, but because chaos was his nature and stealing from the gods was the sweetest kind. Different tribes weave different threads into this tale. The Nez Perce say Coyote enlisted the help of Woodpecker, whose strong beak could crack open the log where fire was hidden. The Karuk tell of him enlisting ants to tunnel beneath the fire being's stronghold. But the heart of the story stays the same. Coyote couldn't succeed through brute force. He had to twist, deceive, and fail spectacularly before finding a way. In one version, he disguises himself as a lanky, shivering pup, whimpering until the fire beings take him in, only to snatch a burning brand in his teeth and sprint down the mountain, the flames nipping at his tail. Every time he stumbles, the fire catches the dry brush, scattering sparks across the land like seeds. Here's where the myth diverges from other culture heroes. Prometheus stole fire with noble defiance, paying in eternal torment. Maui fished up islands with godlike strength, But Coyote, he's no paragon. He's vain, impulsive, and half his plans backfire. He's the reason rivers curve instead of running straight, because he couldn't resist chasing a butterfly mid-creation. Yet that's precisely why his theft matters. Unlike perfect heroes, Coyote mirrors humanity's messy ingenuity. Fire didn't come to us through divine providence or unblemished virtue, but through trial, error, and a dash of reckless audacity. The ecological lessons run deep. Some tribal stories warn that Coyote's gift came with a cost: the first forest fires, ignited by his carelessness. Others say he taught people to use fire responsibly, showing how controlled burns renew the land. This duality is key. Coyote isn't just a savior or a fool, but a reminder that every tool can harm or heal depending on wisdom. Modern fire management teams in the Pacific Northwest now collaborate with tribes, reviving ancient burning practices. Coyote once symbolized proof that myths can smolder for centuries before flaring back to life. Compare him to Loki, another trickster who brings both gifts and ruin. But where Loki's chaos spirals toward doom, Coyote's mischief often accidentally serves the greater good. Perhaps because native traditions see balance differently, Coyote doesn't upend order. He is order's shadow, the necessary wildness that keeps the world from stagnation. Next time you light a campfire, listen close. The crackling laughter in the flames, that's Coyote, still proud of his greatest heist. The snow-laden peaks of Mount Kailash stood silent as a young goddess knelt upon their slopes. Her dark skin turned ashen from the cold, her matted hair coiled like serpents around her shoulders. This was Parvati, daughter of the Himalayas, but not yet the queen of the cosmos. She had loved Shiva since before memory, the wild-haired ascetic who smeared his body with ashes and danced in graveyards, but the god barely noticed her existence. Unlike other deities who wooed their beloveds with poetry and jewels, Shiva was lost in meditation, his third eye closed to all but the infinite void. Parvati's resolve wasn't born of fleeting passion. She discarded her silks and jewels, trading them for bark garments and a diet of fallen leaves. For years, she stood on one leg, chanting Shiva's name as blizzards scoured her skin. She didn't just endure hunger, she embraced it, letting her body wither until her ribs pressed against her skin like the bars of a sacred cage. The other gods whispered that she was mad. Even the sage Narada, ever the trickster, tried to dissuade her, bringing news that Shiva had married another. Parvati didn't flinch. She pressed her forehead to the ice and chanted louder. What makes this penance extraordinary isn't just its extremity, it's its wisdom. Parvati didn't seek to seduce Shiva with beauty or charm. She matched him austerity for austerity, proving her spirit could walk the same razor's edge between creation and annihilation. When a wandering sage mocked her devotion, she burned him to ashes with a glance, her first glimpse of the Durga persona that would later slay demons too powerful for the gods themselves. Here lies the paradox of Parvati. Her love wasn't passive adoration, but a force as unyielding as Shiva's own destruction. Finally, the god stirred. Disguised as an old Brahmin, he came to test her. "Why waste your youth on a mendicant who sleeps in corpses' ashes?" he taunted. Parvati's reply cracked the frozen air. "Even if he were the lowest beggar, my soul knows only him." Shiva, moved not by pity but recognition, saw in her eyes the same fire that had once consumed the universe. Their union became the template for tantric marriage, two halves of one cosmic pulse, where asceticism and passion weren't opposites but entwined strands of divine energy. Yet Parvati's story doesn't end in marital bliss. When the buffalo demon Mahishasura threatened heaven, it was her Durga aspect who answered the god's pleas, riding a lion into battle with 10 arms whirling weapons like a storm of vengeance. This duality, gentle consort and ferocious protector, holds the key to Hindu femininity. Durga isn't a separate entity but the embodiment of Parvati's unshakable will, the same determination that once thawed Shiva's heart turned outward to shield creation from chaos. Modern devotees still reenact her penance during festivals like Tej, where women fast for marital harmony, but the deeper lesson transcends tradition. Parvati's tale whispers that devotion isn't surrender, it's the courage to stand alone in the cold until the universe bends to meet you, and when the moment demands, it's the strength to become the storm. The lyre's strings hummed with divine resonance as Orpheus descended into the abyss, each note parting the shadows like a blade through silk. No mortal had ever charmed their way into Hades' realm, not with weapons, not with prayers, but the Thracian bard's music softened even the flint hearts of the dead. The river Styx's wailing spirit stilled to listen. Cerberus, the three-headed hound, lay down like a pup. Persephone herself, moved by memories of sunlight, let tears fall onto her pomegranate-stained robes. Even Hades, enthroned in obsidian gloom, leaned forward as Orpheus sang of Eurydice, her laughter like spring water, her footfall light as dandelion fluff, her life severed too soon by a viper's bite. The god of the dead relented, but with a condition that would become the crux of every retelling to follow. "Take her," Hades murmured, "but turn back before reaching the surface and she's lost forever." The terms seemed simple, yet this wasn't just a test of patience, it was a gauntlet thrown at art's feet. Could beauty alone overcome instinct? Could trust in the unseen trump mortal frailty? With Eurydice's ghost trailing behind him, Orpheus climbed through the underworld's labyrinthine tunnels, his lyre silent now, his ears straining for any whisper of his beloved's presence. Every step was torment. Was she truly there? Had the gods deceived him? At the final threshold, with daylight licking his heels, he spun and met Eurydice's widening eyes for one fleeting instant before she unraveled into mist, her fingertips brushing his cheek like a sigh. The poets claim her last word was his name, not in anger but in aching farewell. This myth isn't about failure, it's about the limits of human creation. Orpheus' music could bend the universe, but not his own heart. The ancients understood this duality: art can resurrect memories, but never life itself. Even in divine favor, mortality's chains hold fast. Modern adaptations amplify this tension. In Black Orpheus, Marcel Camus transposes the tale to Rio's carnival, where Orpheus is a guitarist racing through favelures, his Eurydice threatened not by snakes but by urban violence. Here, the underworld is a macabre ritual, and the fatal glance becomes a trolley car's headlights. The tragedy stays intact, proving the myth's bones can wear endless flesh. What lingers is the question haunting every artist: when does devotion become hubris? Cocteau's Orpheus frames the bard as a poet obsessed with cryptic radio messages from the afterlife, blurring the line between genius and madness. Anais Nin wrote of Orpheus as the archetypal narcissist, so in love with his own song he forgets the woman it's meant to save. Yet Rilke's sonnets to Orpheus argue the opposite, that by turning, Orpheus wasn't weak but complete. He chose the memory of Eurydice over her hollow echo, embracing the rupture that would immortalize them both. The real underworld here is the human psyche. We've all walked that tunnel, clutching some fragile hope, paralyzed by the fear it might vanish if examined too closely. Orpheus' glance is the existential itch, the need to confirm what must be taken on faith. And perhaps that's why his story outlasts empires, not because it warns against doubt, but because it sanctifies the unbearable weight of love in a world where nothing, not even song, can undo the finality of loss. The heavens themselves seem to recoil as Susanoo, the tempestuous storm god of Shinto lore, was cast from the celestial plains. His crime, a rage so wild it uprooted the sacred rice fields of his sister Amaterasu, the sun goddess, and a grief so consuming it drove him to hurl a flayed horse into her weaving hall. The divine court had tolerated his chaos for too long. Now he fell like lightning toward the mortal world, landing in the rugged realm of Izumo. This wasn't just exile, it was a cosmic demotion, stripping him of divinity and leaving him to wander like a common vagabond. Yet despair led him to an unexpected sight, an elderly couple weeping by a riverbank, their 8 daughters reduced to 7. Every year, the 8-headed serpent Amaterasu emerged from the churning waters to claim a sacrificial maiden, and the family's last child, Kushanodaheim, was next. Something stirred in Susanoo that hadn't in centuries purpose. He struck a bargain. In exchange for Kushanodaheim's hand, he would slay the beast. The plan was as audacious as the storm god himself. Susanoo transformed Kushanodaheim into a comb to tuck safely in his hair, then brewed 8 vats of sake so potent the fumes alone could dizzy a mortal. When Orochi came, its massive heads weaving like reeds in the wind, each one drank from a vat and collapsed in drunken stupor. Susanoo's blade, Totsuka no Tsurugi, flashed like a tempest unleashed, severing head after head until the river ran black with serpentine blood. In the creature's 4th tail, his sword struck something unyielding, the legendary Kusanagi, a blade of such brilliance it would later become one of Japan's 3 sacred treasures. But this isn't just a tale of monster-slaying heroics. Susanoo's redemption arc reveals the Shinto worldview, that even flawed deities can realign with divine purpose through service to mortals. The sake vats symbolize the power of wit over brute strength, a recurring theme in Japanese folklore, and Kusanagi's discovery in Orochi's tale, a metaphor for finding enlightenment in the darkest, most unexpected places. Modern Japan still honors this legacy. At Atsuta Shrine, where Kusanagi is said to reside, priests perform rituals mirroring Susanoo's cunning. The annual Sake Festival in Izumo celebrates the victory with overflowing casks, while sumo wrestlers invoke his name for explosive power. Even the serpent-slaying trope echoes in anime like Naruto, where Orochimaru embodies similar chaos. What makes Susanoo's story resonate isn't the sword or the slaughter, it's the transformation. The god who once terrified heaven became its staunchest defender, proving that even the wildest storms eventually clear the air. And perhaps that's the lesson coiled within this myth. Redemption isn't about erasing flaws, but channeling them into something greater. The battlefield smelled of iron and damp earth as the Morrigan strode among the slain, her cloak billowing like smoke under a moon choked by clouds. To the warriors of Ulster, she was a phantom flickering at the edges of their vision. A raven perched on a spear shaft one moment, a crimson-haired woman whispering into the wind the next. But in the Tain Bo Cuelge, the great Celtic epic of cattle raids and doomed heroes, she wasn't just an omen of death. She was the weaver of fate itself, her voice threading through the chaos like a needle through flesh. When the teenage demigod Cu Chulainn stood alone against Queen Medbi's armies, the Morrigan came to him not as a harbinger, but as a sovereign testing his worth. Disguised as a stunning noblewoman, she offered him her love and alliance, a gift wrapped in peril. His refusal wasn't just personal, it was a rejection of her divine authority. Enraged, she attacked him as an eel tripping him in ford waters, as a wolf snapping at his heels, as a hornless red cow stampeding through his ranks. Yet each time, Cu Chulainn wounded her, unaware he was battling a goddess. Only when she appeared as an old woman milking a cow with 3 injuries mirroring his blows did he realize the truth, and with a grudging blessing healed her. This wasn't mercy, it was diplomacy. The Morrigan's power over life and death meant even heroes bowed when her true form was revealed. Her crows weren't mere scavengers. They were extensions of her will, their cries mapping the turning tides of battle. Celtic warriors knew the sight of ravens gathering meant the Morrigan had chosen her favorites. To die under their gaze was to be claimed by divinity. Modern archaeologists still find raven motifs etched into shields and burial stones, tributes to the goddess who decided which souls would ascend to the other world. But her connection to sovereignty ran deeper than war. At sacred sites like the Hill of Tara, kings underwent rituals invoking her to legitimize their rule. A true ruler didn't just command armies, he endured the Morrigan's trials, proving he could bear the weight of her prophecies. What chills the bones about her legends is their lingering ambiguity. Unlike Valkyries who serve Odin's will or the Furies who enforce cosmic justice, the Morrigan answers only to her own inscrutable code. She aids Ku Chulainn in one breath, then foretells his demise in the next. She crowns kings, then watches impassively as rivals tear them down. This duality reflects the Celts' worldview that destiny isn't linear but a tangled knot of choices and consequences. Even her name fractures into meanings: Great Queen, Phantom Queen, or the more ominous Terror's Shadow, depending on which dialect you trace. Today, her influence flickers in unexpected places. Irish rugby teams adopt her raven as a mascot, channeling her ferocity. Fantasy authors reimagine her as a shape-shifting anti-heroine, her motives eternally veiled. But walk the fields of County Louth where the Táin unfolded, and you might hear locals speak of a cawing crow that follows visitors, not threatening but assessing. Because the Morrigan was never just about death, she was the reminder that power, like a battlefield crow, always circles waiting to see who will rise and who will become legend. Long before museums and movie theaters, these ancient tales were already shaping human expression in ways that still ripple through our world. Take the Renaissance, where artists like Botticelli and Michelangelo didn't just depict gods, they resurrected them with a brushstroke. Botticelli's Birth of Venus isn't merely a painting, it's a portal to the moment Aphrodite emerged from sea foam, her pose echoing the very hymns that praised her. Over in the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo's creation of Adam pulses with the same divine energy as the Babylonian Enuma Elish, where Marduk shaped the cosmos from Tiamat's corpse. These artists weren't copying myths, they were conversing with them, using Olympian dramas to explore humanism's rise. Even Caravaggio's Medusa, her severed head frozen in a scream, channels the visceral terror of Greek hero narratives, reminding viewers that triumph and tragedy are two sides of the same coin. But the gods didn't stay confined to canvas. They leaped into festivals where cultures reenacted their stories as communal lifelines. Diwali's fireworks aren't just celebratory, they're echoes of Rama's return to Ayodhya, his victory over Ravana symbolized by lamps lighting the darkness. In Japan's Junmatsuri, elaborate floats parade through Kyoto like mobile shrines, honoring Susanoo's triumph over Yamata no Orochi. Meanwhile, Mexico's Day of the Dead blends Aztec lore of Mictlantecuhtli, the underworld goddess, with Catholic ritual, proving myths don't fade, they evolve. These aren't antiquated traditions, they're living dialogues between past and present, where communities reaffirm their identities through divine narratives. Psychology, too, has leaned into these archetypes. Carl Jung saw gods and goddesses as facets of the collective unconscious Odins and Athenas lurking in every human psyche. His concept of the shadow mirrors Hades' underworld, the repressed darkness we must confront to grow. Modern therapists use these frameworks to help patients reframe struggles as heroic journeys, their personal trials recast as Odyssean sagas. Even corporate workshops tout finding your inner Loki to spark innovation, though the trickster's chaotic legacy suggests maybe that's a double-edged sword. And then there's pop culture, where Thor trades his chariot for a subway commute in Marvel Comics, and Percy Jackson turns demigod angst into a teenage franchise. These adaptations aren't dilutions, they're continuations. Neil Gaiman's American Gods pits deities against Wi-Fi and media, asking what happens when old myths collide with new idols. The answer: they adapt. Just as Viracocha's prophecy was twisted by conquistadors, modern storytellers remix these tales to interrogate power, identity, and belief. From temple carvings to TikTok trends, these stories persist because they're more than entertainment, they're the operating system of human culture. Every time a filmmaker lens flares a superhero landing or a therapist nods at a client's hero's journey, they're tapping into a lineage that stretches back to campfires and sacred caves. The gods never left, they just learned new languages. burned books and shattered statues aren't the only casualties of time. Some of history's greatest myths vanished without a whisper. Take the Carthaginians, whose empire once rivaled Rome. We know they sacrificed to Baal Hammon, a god so mighty his name meant Lord of the Altar of Incense, but what epic tales died with his temples? The Romans salted Carthage's earth, erasing not just a city but an entire pantheon stories. A single gold pendant shows Baal Hammon enthroned, rays bursting from his shoulders like a forgotten Mediterranean sun god. But was he a destroyer, a creator, or something beyond our modern categories? Then there are the Cucuteni Tripilia figurines, those eerie clay goddesses with exaggerated hips and featureless faces, buried in the ashes of Europe's oldest burned cities. Were they deities of harvest or destruction? Their culture practiced something extraordinary, burning their own settlements every 60 years like a ritual reset. Did these fires cleanse or appease? Without written records, we're left decoding silent artifacts. A goddess figurine gripping snakes like a Balkan Medusa, another cradling a loaf of bread as if feeding ghosts. Even the Etruscans, who taught Rome augury and architecture, left behind only fragments of their sacred texts. The Zagreb mummy wrappings, linen strips inscribed with prayers, hint at a goddess named Tyran who ruled love and birds. Did her myths inspire Venus, or was she something wilder? Archaeologists recently unearthed a bronze mirror showing a winged Lossa, a divine messenger guiding souls, but her stories are smoke. These gaps haunt us because they're mirrors. The Carthaginians' child sacrifices scandalized Rome, yet we've found tiny cremated bones nestled with toy animals, proof that love and horror coexisted in their theology. Maybe Baal Hammon wasn't a monster, but a god who demanded what all ancient deities did: absolute devotion. As for the Cucuteni Tripilia, their cyclical burnings suggest a belief in renewal through destruction, a theme echoing from phoenix myths to modern climate crises. The real mystery isn't just what we've lost, it's why these fragments still tug at us. A Carthaginian amulet here, a Tripilian vase there, like jigsaw pieces from different puzzles, hinting at stories we'll never fully hear. But perhaps that's the point. These silent gods remind us that history isn't a preserved manuscript. It's a palimpsest where every erased layer still bleeds through. From the earliest flickering campfires to the glowing screens of today, we've gathered to share these stories not because they're true in a literal sense, but because they reveal deeper truths about what it means to be human. Whether it's the thunderbolts of Zeus or the cunning of Anansi, these myths are mirrors reflecting our fears, hopes, and unanswerable questions. Why does the sun rise? What happens after death? How do we endure suffering? Every culture has woven divine narratives to explore these mysteries, and in doing so, they've given us something remarkable, a shared language of wonder. Think about your own life for a moment. When you face a storm, do you ever feel like Thor battling giants? When you outwit a problem, does Coyote's grin flash in your mind? These ancient tales aren't relics, they're alive in our metaphors, our art, even our memes. Joseph Campbell once said, "Gods are metaphors transcending time and space." And he was right. Whether you see them as archetypes, allegories, or something more, their power lies in how they help us make sense of chaos. So here's my question for you. Which myth resonates with you the most? Is it the tragic beauty of Orpheus and Eurydice, the defiant laughter of Maui, or perhaps a lesser-known tale passed down in your family? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what stories stir your soul. And if this journey through gods and goddesses has sparked even a fraction of the awe I feel for these tales, consider subscribing. There are always more legends to uncover, more mysteries to unravel. As we close, let's return to Campbell one last time. Mythology is not a lie. It is poetry. It is metaphor. It has been well said that mythology is the penultimate truth, penultimate because the ultimate cannot be put into words. So keep questioning, keep imagining, and most of all, keep telling the stories that remind us we're all part of something grander. Until next time, may your own journey be epic.